I am so glad that you've joined me on the Morning Mindset edition of the Live, Build, Change podcast. Now think about the name of this. It's the Morning Mindset. Now, of course, you don't have to listen to this in the morning. But the reason I call it the Morning Mindset is because I believe every single one of us as human beings needs to take the time first thing when we wake up in the morning to get our mindset right, to get ourselves on track. Because however far into the day you go without doing that, you're going to be living according to kind of a default setting in your mind of perhaps how you ended up the day before, or perhaps according to just the bad habits of thinking and believing that you've established throughout your life, instead of intentionally putting your mindset into a place of submission under the truth of God from His Word and conform it to the truth of God. And why is that so important? It's because God's truth is the truth. The way God views things is the way things are. And if we can live our lives according to that truth, we'll be living according to reality. We won't be off chasing things we shouldn't chase. We won't be believing things we shouldn't believe. We will be living in the truth of who God says we are as His children, as His sons and daughters who follow Jesus Christ. And we've been looking in Philippians chapter 3, and we've been talking about this issue of confidence. And just yesterday, we wrapped up how guilt relates to confidence. And Paul has made it very clear in this chapter that none of his religious efforts make any difference when it comes to confidence. He's saying he puts no confidence in what he calls the flesh, which is my efforts, my human efforts to please God or to get in a place of confidence before Him. Instead, he places his confidence in the fact that God has given him the person of Jesus Christ. And Paul has made it his ambition to put his focus there. Notice verse 10 of chapter 3. He says, I want to know Christ. Okay, so that's Paul's goal in life. I want to know Christ. Now, he doesn't mean just to know Him like you would know an acquaintance, where you've shaken their hand and you've said, hey, nice to know you. No, he's saying, I want to know Him. The Greek word there is the word that means to know Him intimately by experience. So that's Paul's goal. He says, yes, to know the power of His resurrection. I mean, wouldn't you love to know what it's like to experience that kind of power that can raise a person from the dead like it did Jesus? Paul wants to know that. But he goes on, and this is where you might think Paul's a little crazy. He says, I want to know the participation or the fellowship of His sufferings. Wow, I want to know Jesus so deeply that I understand what it was like for Him to suffer for me. Man, if I could talk, it'd be great. For me. I want to know what it was like for Him to suffer for me. That His suffering brought something about for me, and I want to participate in that in some way. I want to become like Him in His death. And what does that mean? Well, it means on one hand, I want to be self-sacrificial toward others. I want to become like Him in that way. And so somehow, I would even want to attain to the resurrection from the dead. Now, I think there's no arguing that Paul really wanted to know Jesus Christ. He wanted to know Him in the fullness of His human experience, because he knows that it's in Jesus Christ that every good thing in his life is going to come about. That's where his confidence will come from. That's where his knowledge of God and God's purposes in his life will come from. That's where every good thing in life comes from as a believer in Jesus Christ, is by knowing Him. So let me ask you today, have you set your mind to know Jesus Christ above all other things? To the deepest extent that you can, because as you know Him, you're going to, by default, know His will for your life today. And you're going to be able to hear His voice as He leads you. We're going to talk about this again on tomorrow's Morning Mindset.